Hey, Phil, how are you?
Not bad, not bad. I just heard you mention something about Jade Helm,
Yes.
and I must confess, though I'm otherwise a fairly rational person, I do listen to Alex Jones a fair bit.
Well, I mean, anything for entertainment purposes, but go ahead.
Well, that's the thing. I'm willing to defend the listening of Alex Jones and that sort of thing, not just for entertainment purposes, but also for news. Some of it's strictly for entertainment purposes, but I think that actually his national paranoia actually makes him pick up really good news stories.
Okay, and how do you differentiate between the part that you listen to for entertainment and the actual news stories?
Well, okay. I suppose in as much as it's backed by other things, if he links you to other people who, I don't know, seem kind of otherwise...
So give me an example
legit.
of what you can get from Alex Jones in terms of good analysis and news that you couldn't get somewhere else that you have found to be credible.
Okay. So all these stories, I think it was in the wake of Ferguson that the whole notion of militarization of the police became kind of mainstream in the United States.
Right.
I don't know because I often read sort of things that are less mainstream, as you've been able to guess by now. But I don't know. Am I right to say that that's sort of when it became very mainstream?
I mean, I think it became far more apparent to people, yes.
Right. And so, that's the sort of thing that Alex Jones has been talking about for a very long time. It may have to do in his mind with, fourth dimensional reptilians or something like that.
But you see, here's the point: is that you could go and we had what's his name, Balko on the program. I don't know, a year or two ago when he came out with his book about
guy.
Yeah. And now at the Post, Radley Balko, we had him on to talk about his book. I mean, this isn't submerged stuff. And the point is that the real problem is that when he does talk about that story, the militarization of the police, and makes it about reptilians or about changelings or about some one world government that is going to take over, then all of a sudden what it does is it takes all that energy and outrage that is legitimate about a specific problem and misdirect it and send you down a rabbit hole. So maybe you're intelligent enough to realize that the foundations and the reasons why he gets there are wrong, and therefore the reactions that you should have to that and what you can do about it is very different than what he's prescribing. But for most of the people who watch that, all it does is just drive them down a rabbit hole. And in fact, if I wanted to protect something like the idea of the militarization of police and make sure that there was no possible way for a rational backlash to happen that could actually change it from a policy standpoint, I'd do exactly what he's doing. I would do exactly what he's doing. I would drive people down a rabbit hole of conspiracy and sort of phantasm and whatever it is. And this notion that they're helpless against this sort of rising tide of these sort of space aliens that have come out of Mount Shasta, and there's no way you can fight these guys because they've been doing it forever. I mean, that's what I would do if I was actually interested in maintaining the status quo.
So are you trying to say that Alex Jones is in on it?
I'm trying to say that, I'll tell you, if Alex Jones didn't exist, then the CIA or corporate taskmasters would invent them.
Right.
Yeah.
But to get back to Jade Helm, my understanding is that whole crowd seems to think that that's an exercise that is basically training American soldiers to be used to the notion of operating in an American-type environment, basically. And, I think that ultimately they're right to be concerned about the particular types of operations that soldiers
Do you think, let me ask you a question. This scenario that you're talking about, where the U.S. military is being trained to operate on U.S. territory. First of all, this has happened forever. Okay, A. B, do you really think that to the extent that the American government is going to suppress its own people, it's going to happen in Utah and Texas? Or do you think it's going to happen in urban environments where there's actually a danger? Like, I don't think the American government, in the wildest conspiracy theory you could ever come up with, is really going to care about what's going on in rural America. With all due respect. What threat is it if there's people amassing? Hell, the Bureau of Land Management's not even doing anything about what's his face? About Bundy.
Right, Bundy. Cliven Bundy.
Yeah, no, that's not. I mean, to the extent that there's any threat to the American public from sort of the military in terms of civil liberties and whatnot, it's already happening. But it's happening in places like parts of Baltimore, like parts of New York City, like parts of Chicago or Detroit, or St. Louis.
Right. So
but let's focus on what's going to happen in the desert in Utah with 1,200 soldiers because they have a map that calls it hostile territory. I mean, that's a perfect example of why I'm saying that Alex Jones is so particularly dangerous to any real change in this country. Because while you're off chasing these ghosts, and that's all that is. That's just a ghost. That's make-believe. Then you're not focusing on, hey, there's some real reforms that could happen in places where there's a real, genuine problem. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with Alex Jones.
Well, I think from either perspective...
If you want to be worried about a one-world government, then people should be out there talking about the TPP. Now, I know he touches on it, but it's all sort of like set in this sort of other make-believe world. When in fact, all it is wealthy interests who are corporations. They're not like, the Bilderberger Group. It's just people with aligned agendas to make money and to maintain and influence government to the extent that they can so that they can make more money. That's all it is. But when you create some type of fantasy around it, like it's some type of superhero situation where like these are special villains with special powers. And I'm surprised that I'm even able to talk about this without them swooping in and putting me in some type of floating orb where I can't speak. I mean, come on. It's a joke.
It's as though you've listened to his broadcast before.
Oh, of course.
We got to get comedy material.
Sorry?
We get good comedy material.
Right. But I think, you're right. People can become paralyzed. Thinking, there's nothing we can really do because, they've got like all sorts of technologies. And anyways, the whole world is one vast conspiracy. But if you just take the stories that he brings up, I still think that, for instance, he might actually bring a lot of people to be worried about the militarization of police, for instance. Another story.
Yes, but he's bringing them he's getting them worried about the militarization of the police. But according to him, there's nothing you can do about
it, except buy some of his products. But
well, exactly. Right. There's nothing you can do about it. And not only that, he's pointing to the wrong places where it's a problem. So he's not doing anything that is going to bring about any positive good.
Well, I'm not sure that he hasn't really dealt with stories like, for instance, so you're mentioning in Baltimore and Chicago. I imagine you're talking about like the inner city, mostly black neighborhoods where police are abusing citizens.
Right.
You're right. That's not a particularly prominent theme on the show.
Yeah.
But,
now, isn't that shocking?
Well, I don't think he's completely avoided it. Especially, I mean, I can remember some.
Well, good for him. He didn't completely avoid the number one story on every news media that nobody can turn on the internet or watch TV. I mean, you see my point, don't you? Like, I mean, and assuming I would put you probably in one of the for people who actually take him seriously, probably in the, I don't know, top 2% of discerning. And even still, I think it's problematic for someone like you.
Well, I just think as a news aggregator, he does a very good job.
Well, I have no doubt. And also sending you down the rabbit hole with all that news.
Well, not me, I wouldn't say.
Okay.
But like for
you did call me about like, Jade 51.
Right. Well,
and you are thinking about like this is what they would do if they wanted to take over Utah, Texas, and I guess the desert in California. I mean, come on.
Right.
Dude.
No. So, especially since I'm calling from well north of there in Canada, I'm not particularly worried about that myself. But I would worry about, say, troops training to be desensitized about working in an American environment.
Yeah,
in an
you know what?
American-style
You know what
environment.
they're being desensitized to? They're getting used to fighting in terrain that is very similar to the Middle East.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah, that's basically, it's not just there's that too. There's that. And then the other stuff is Fantasyland. Fantasyland.
Okay, well, another story, I think I got it through there. It may have been through other publications.
Gotta be quick.
Okay, police training with no hesitation targets. Have you heard about these?
No.
It's basically those shooting range targets with cutouts of people. And it's been shown in social psychology that if you have cutouts of people for your training targets, you're more likely to actually pull the trigger on an actual person than if you just have a round, a round target.
They've been doing this at least since Vietnam.
Right, exactly. Well, since about World War II, they've gone from soldiers shooting, I think it was around 10% of the time, and then the soldier was exposed to well over 90%.
Okay.
Okay. And now police officers using what are called these no hesitation targets, basically, with grandma being the target, or, pregnant woman being the target, hence the name no hesitation targets. I think it may be, that's a smaller problem, but that is
like I don't know. I mean, the hesitation targets, the no hesitation targets. I mean, come on, seriously. You've got an entire, segments of the population who are subject to, when they walk down the street, they get stop and frisked. They're criminalized from the day one. There's a whole raft of actual reforms that could go on, but it doesn't make it as interesting as the idea that the no hesitation targets, they're going to shoot pregnant women, and that's a problem for you. I mean, come on.
Well, it's not a personal problem for me, but
no, but that's the game plan. But listen, here's my suggestion to you. Order some of his super beta male vitality, drink it, see if maybe you can see through the BS that's going on there. But I got to go. I appreciate the phone call.
All right, well, thank you.